I will say that our guest today on Becoming Ronin is one of my absolute favorite people. Greatest smile, always outgoing. Will put a smile on your face, and one of the most knowledgeable coaches in the business, if you will. And guy I shared a hotel room with.
Wow.
Early on, over 20 years. You know, I was thinking about it.
You can keep those stories to yourself, you know.
Well, I want to bring out my love for this man.
All right.
And do you know what year that was? Because it has to be over 20 years ago.
I don't. It has to be like 2006 at the latest.
Wow.
So
I definitely 18. I was thinking like 04, 05. Yeah. I think 06
Well, I was the end of my college career. I was still in college because I remember it was during the summer that I bought Ryan Lee's products. Mm-hmm. Then I reached out to Eric Cressy. Oh no, I met Eric Cressy at the APF Nationals, and I think it was 05. I think it's 05 is the year it was. Yeah. Because that's the Nationals that I met Eric at. And then he was like, yeah, you know, you can come out, like crash on my couch. We'll drive down there together. And he hooked me up with Smitty as a roommate. And then like unbeknownst to me, I snore both in and out when I breathe at night. And Smitty, not really knowing me, wasn't sure how to deal with it. So he just made bird noises anytime I'd wake him up. So I would wake up, he'd try to go back to sleep. So then the next night, I got Smitty absolutely inebriated drunk so that he could actually sleep. But when we came back to the hotel, there's like tons of people in the hotel and we were like stumbling everywhere. And there's like all these people there. So it was quite, that event was something else. It was like the beginning of so many strength coaches that are doing incredibly massive things to this day. So it's been wild seeing all of that develop over the last, you know, close to 20 years.
It's so weird having you say that, because thinking back, I can definitely see that was sort of this dawn of all these new beginnings. Like looking back, I see it clearly, but back then we were all trying to find our way.
Yeah, we all had crazy ideas, and you know, some people were making money sharing that, and some weren't. And like we were like, you know, people were writing for T Nation, people were creating their own products, and back then it was still selling physical products. So it was folded, but you know, manuals and DVDs and things like that. And that side of stuff was like, you know, how do you do that? And it just, if you know, a few people were doing it well, and we all wanted to learn, and it was strange because it's like you think how big the community is now, you know, especially with social media. You look at, you know, certain people have, you know, 4 million followers or something like that. And it's like somehow many of the top strength coaches back then, I mean, Zach Evanish, Elliot Hulse, you know, Smitty was there. I'm not sure if DeFranco was there or not, but like Mike Boyle was there. Just like just so many different people were there. Eric Cressy, Mike Robinson, like the list just goes on. And these are people who have like shaped the strength and conditioning industry, both in the collegiate setting and the professional setting. So it's just wild to think, you know, and I was just a powerlifter at the time who was like wanting to, you know, make money doing, you know, what I loved. And, you know, I found myself having conversations with Mike Boyle about, you know, like the equipment that we used and like squatting, because at the time he was really against squatting. You know, when we were talking about like, what's the role of a professional strength and conditioning coach? Like, is it really to get your players stronger? Or is it to keep them healthy? Right? Like that's what they get paid to play. And so we just had these deep conversations, and in a setting that it was like, at the time, nobody was like paranoid that someone was going to try to steal their client or something like that. So it was like, it was a very open forum, and people were just so willing to share back then. And I think they still are now, like when you go to certain events, but it's changed in somewhat because there's so many people in the industry now, right? So many people at different levels. So yeah, it was something special for sure.
How do you think, I'm so interested in what you're talking about, like how do you think it has changed? Because I remember I've told Obi this, and I've taken him to countless seminars over the years since he was a kid, but we used to go to these seminars, and that's where you got all your information, like the real good, like what the coaches were working on, what was working for them, how they're actually applying it, all those early like NSCA events and all these clinics and Perform Better. And that was a networking opportunity. You would go and you'd meet everybody, and it was handshakes, it was face to face, it was, you know, sharing those ideas, like you said. But now it just seems the industry is 10x bigger, but it's it's even more disconnected, like you said.
Yeah.
Like, is that what you're feeling?
Yeah, a little disconnected. I would say like the biggest thing I see is surface level knowledge, right? Like people, like back with us, like it was like you followed little trains. Like someone would mention someone, and you, how do I get this book, or how do I get that book, or you know, and
Right.
everybody, like your depth of knowledge, you were like, everybody was like super interested in learning, applying, and then sharing. You know, like I love Dave Tate's motto, you know, live, learn, pass on, and it was like it seemed like everybody embodied that back then. Like nobody was doing anything that they hadn't done themselves or had like, or put a team through. Like it was like results based, like sharing, you know, like this is what I did, this is what worked. And now, and I'll use the example of Conjugate. This is the first thing that came to mind, but I'll hear people say like, oh, Conjugate doesn't work, I don't do Conjugate. And then I look at their training program and they have like speed work with bands, like, but it's the third exercise. And I'm like, well, it might not be the main movement here, but it's you have weights right here that are like 45, 50%, and you use an accommodating resistance. Like, I don't know about you, but that didn't come from anywhere but Westside Barbell and Louie Simmons. But they don't know that, right? It's like they don't know the history of the specialty bars and the bands and the chains. They don't know what coaches have at the collegiate level like did research on wide stance squatting, box squat. Like there's all this information out there, and people, they say stuff and it's like, well, I have a study that says completely different, and the study was done after 10 years of personal experience. It just like backed up what we already knew. And I think like that's kind of, unfortunately, if you look good, you're somewhat of a showman, or you know how to entertain. You know, videos of someone deadlifting on a skateboard are getting more attention than someone deadlifting a world record. You know, it's just phenomenal, and it's strange in a way, but at the same time, it mimics society, right? It mimics what's going on in the world, where people read headlines and the headline is opposite to what the story actually says, but they'll go share it and be like, you got to check this out. And then you read it and you're like, well, it actually doesn't, the headline's clickbait. It's the actual article is completely opposite, but they never go deep. And I think that's kind of a little bit of the problem we have in the strength and conditioning industry, is a lot of surface information that then is passed on like fact, right? Someone heard this or did that, and then they're now regurgitating that information. It's like Chinese whispers. It kind of weakens at every person it gets to. You know, and it seems very cyclic, just like the world does, you know, where it's like linear periodization became hot again, you know, and it's like all these different things. And you're like, oh, wait, it's just this phase. And we're almost like a little bit in the 80s with a little bro science, like sprinkled on there, not much depth. And people are just like back to like beating themselves up. And, you know, it's a lot of the science seems to be forgotten, but that's what happens, you know. Social media is quick information, short information, and it's about what people want.
I think in one hand you have really good information being propagated through social media. Like if you think about the gyms 10 years ago, 15 years ago compared to now, you had your carpet and chrome, and then you had your dungeons, and there was nothing in between. And now you can walk into any gym and there's bands, chains, sleds. And so I think on one hand you have a good movement towards, you know, proper training, and then on the other hand you have like what you're saying, where there's just so much information, no one can sort out the good from the bad. But I am curious, from someone like yourself that's reached a high level of powerlifting, what is something that you feel when you're on social media, like the constant eye roll, like what do you think has been propagated that is more pernicious and doing more harm than good? Have you recognized something that you feel like is just like you wish you could shout from the rooftops to stop doing?
You know, it's tough because I see different things all the time. I think to your point, you're right in the sense that like there is better information out there and available to people than there was when, you know, me and Smitty started in this. You know, like, and that might have been because back then to write a book, like you had to be someone that people considered an expert on the field.
Yeah.
Now it's like an even playing field. The good thing from that is when someone comes along who has unique, ideas, knows how to articulate those, knows how to share those, all of a sudden they can really blow up, and deservedly so. Flip side of that, you get people who blow up or don't. But I think a lot of the stuff that's like interesting with the strength world is like the complexity, like, and again, I had this conversation with Chad Akes. I was saying basically, like, in my 20s I was so resilient and bounced back from training so quick. Like, I didn't have joint issues, I didn't have like I had mobility issues, but not for powerlifting, right? Like, with the big on the spectrum there,
Right.
but like, I wasn't doing an hour warm up before I trained. I think those are some of the things that, like, more than anything, you got people who think they need to do a 2-hour morning routine to get ready for the day. And then, that's not their training. That's just like, that's like breath work and cold plunges and stuff like that. Now, I do all of this stuff, but I'm not spending 2 hours every day doing it. Just like I do certain mobility stuff in the gym to get ready to go under the barbell, which then I warm up under the barbell, right? Like, bar 25,
Right.
45. That's all we know how to count in. Well, I've learned count kilos because everyone uses kilos now, but dumb math, but we warm up under the barbell. And I think that's probably more than anything is like, there's only so much time, and it's about efficiency of time. I think like that's probably the big thing. People try to do too much that they don't necessarily need to do, right? If you've got flexible hamstrings, you don't need to be doing static stretching to like lengthen your hamstrings. A little bit of dynamic just to see, gauge where you are, if there is tightness, not tightness. But there should be, depending on the day, you should know what needs to be loose, what doesn't necessarily need work, and be able to go right into your workout. And then the one other thing I've seen a lot of too is and I think this is probably mostly in powerlifting, maybe in Olympic lifting, but I don't follow that sport close enough. But I think a lot of people don't think they need to do anything beyond the main movements, right? And they don't see themselves. And I'm sure, Smitty, you probably have some thoughts on this. Like, people don't see themselves as an all-around athlete. They pigeon themselves into this, and like, I just have to do this. And it's like, over time, that creates strength in one area, weakness in another, which opens up injury risk. And so that's like one of the things, like, I don't see people doing specialized assistant exercises to build their base, to do that. And so they're a power lifter, but they have no base to begin with. So they might be 6 foot, 180 pounds. And, after a year, they're 6 foot, 182 pounds. And it's like, there's not enough muscle on you. Like, you can get strong by maximizing muscle recruitment, right? So like, we can turn, like, every lift's a full body lift if you do it correctly, right? And it only shouldn't be if you want isolation. If you're purposely training for isolation, you isolate. But when you're not, you want to recruit as many muscles as possible in a squat, in a bench press. Like, that's why we talk about training your back for bench press. A lot of people, so you can maximize that, but there's a limit to that. But your body weight, that's another factor, right? And how much muscle you have and all of that. And I would say that's kind of something that people pick a weight class and they just stay there, and they hit these plateaus and they don't make gains. And a lot of it is like, your leverages aren't optimal for what you're trying to achieve, but they don't build the base, they don't build the muscle, they don't do different phases within whatever program they're doing. They're just constantly doing that same thing over and over again. And I think it leads to a lot of burnout. And powerlifting especially, I see people come and go really, really quick. It's very similar to bodybuilding now, where someone does a show, rebounds really hard, and then doesn't do another show. And it's like, wait a minute, like, if you were a powerlifter or you were a bodybuilder, whether you compete or not isn't actually what is defining that. It's the way you live every single day, right? It's the choices that you've made. Is you're going to train a certain way, you're going to do this, you're going to get stronger, or you're going to build muscle, or, if you're an Olympic lifter, you're going to build those lifts. And so I think that's super interesting. And to that point, when you look at athletes who train, like, training is for their sport. And I don't think a lot of people who compete in barbell movements think of the barbell as the sport, and then they have to train for the sport, right? They see the barbell as the training. So that's kind of what I've been seeing.
Yeah, that's
fantastic. I do want to switch gears a little bit and talk about how you got the West Side. And if you could just give us a quick primer on how you see the conjugate model, just in its most basic form. If someone wants to start implementing conjugate in their home gym or, you know, with their athletes or whatever. But I was interested to know first, before you got into conjugate, how you got the West Side, because I knew you were training with another power lifter, but it was like an independent guy, right? His name was Mike something, right?
Yeah, Brent Mikesell.
Oh, Mike Cell. Okay.
Yeah,
I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember it, but I knew it had Mike in there somewhere.
Yeah, so I had complications getting through NCAA clearinghouse, so I ended up volunteering as a strength and conditioning coach. So I was looking for other people to powerlift with. I found the strength and conditioning coach at Washington State. I was at Idaho University. Found the strength and conditioning coach at Washington State University. He was driving up to Spokane, Washington twice a week to train with Brent Mikesell, who at the time had the world record of 11:41 in the squat. So me being naive kid was like, hey, can I ride with you? And so twice a week I'd go up and I was training with him, and he was using bands and the reverse hyper and all those different things. And I'm making a very long story short, but I essentially learned, oh, this all came from Louie Simmons. So then I became obsessed with Louie. Out of college, once I'd graduated, I had a gym, it failed. I went to hire a business coach, and they convinced me to move to Kentucky to run a health club for them. The reason I took the job was it was 4 hours from West Side. So I would drive every Friday 4 hours to West Side to squat, and then 4 hours home every single Friday. And after doing that for a little while, Louie was like, you know, you should just move here. And so he gave me the invite, and yeah, that was it. I ended up in the morning crew because I'd been training with the night crew with Dave Hoff. And for those that don't know Dave, he's arguably the strongest powerlifter in especially in multiply that's ever lived. He only manned a total 3,100, totaled over 3,000 more than anybody else. Nobody's even close to him right now. But we would train together. The week I was moving there, he left. And he left for a short period. He ended up coming back to West Side, but he left. And so he was like, you should just come with me. And I was like, I'm not moving to Columbus, Ohio to train at like this other gym. Right. And so I asked Louie about training in the morning crew, and he looked at me and goes, well, you'd be the weakest guy, but come on. So that was the transition to West Side. It was the best thing though, because Louie didn't really train the night crew. Another guy named Bob Coe did. So I got to work directly with Louie. And because I was a sponge for information, Louie really appreciated that. And I kind of became his like simplifying voice for seminars and things like that. He'd say stuff people wouldn't understand. I say, well, what he's trying to say is this. And oh, okay. So to your point, in terms of the conjugate system, everybody tries to make it super complicated. And it's literally the concept of you have 4 sessions a week minimum, right? For 4 core sessions. 2 of those are max effort, which means you're working up to a single. On one day, it's lower body. On one day, it's upper body. What exercise you choose does not matter. And then your dynamic days, you have so speed days, which is basically, usually weights between 40 and 60%. It varies at what accommodating resistance you're using, but it's lighter. And you're doing that for maximal explosion on every rep, right? And so it's perfect reps at maximal speed. You can't sacrifice technique for speed and vice versa, right? So the real key, like Louie would always say, you should just look fast. That's really key. If you can go down and up and it doesn't look fast, it's too heavy, you go lighter, go from there. So that's where people start, because people want like a meter per second and things like that. And so that's really the core view. And then your repetition method, which is really sub-maximal training, right? That is based on Prilepin's chart primarily. Like that's where your assistant work comes in, right? So over the years, I found ways to make this easy, like on max effort days. And I stole this concept from Donnie Thompson. He would max out on his lower body movement, and then speed work would just be 50% of what he maxed out on Monday for lower body. I was doing 35% weight for benches, and instead of doing waves, was just doing straight each week, that different common. So if you max out on Wednesday, your upper body movement, you can do your 35% with accommodating resistance. So that makes that really easy. Now you can do your 3-week waves and all of those things, but these are just these are the things when you learn the system. And then there's different phases, of course, but that's the core of the system. And I think most people don't really understand that the magic happens not in the main movement. The magic is the assistant exercises. And so your assistant exercises are designed to build your weaknesses, right? So if you have massive triceps and a small chest, your assistant exercises are mainly going to be for your chest, for your shoulders, and for your back, and less for the triceps. But if you have really weak triceps, now you're going to be doing more tricep work on upper body days. Same on lower body days. If you got big ham hogs and your hamstrings are massive, posterior chain is not probably what you need to work on, right? Maybe anterior chain. So it's really about looking at the body, looking at what muscles are weak, and assessing that. And sometimes you get it wrong, right? It looks like a weakness, but it's actually an impingement, or it's you don't know how to fire a muscle. That's where the magic comes into the programming. But overall, it's very simple, and people want to complicate it. But the reality is that, like, and Louie didn't come up with this, but if you have maximal effort training, dynamic effort training, and submaximal training in your program, you will get stronger, right? Now, most people have 2 of those 3, right? But so when you put all 3 together, that's kind of the trump card. So, I always thought, oh, how would it apply outside of powerlifting? I never really had the opportunity to work with people outside of powerlifting. I've trained, I've done online training with CrossFit athletes and stuff like that. Worked really, really well, but it was, for their strength gains. So recently I've got working with strongman. My wife's a strongman competitor, and working with her and having to think creatively, because, the movements are different. Is this going to work? She trusted me fully, and boom, like, her numbers are just going through the roof. She turns 40 at the end of this month. Probably we're going to win California's strongest. And, she's hitting the numbers she was hitting over a decade ago, when she was competing back then. She took a long time off, like I did with powerlifting. So I'm like, okay, like, now I know it works across the board. I've done it with multiple disciplines. I'm comfortable with that now, and I've tried all sorts of stuff personally as well and experimented, but it's simple, but it gets complex because then people start going into like variations and they get confused. And and I always tell people, especially for people who are new to it, it's just like, you don't need to have like 7 bars to be able to do this. Like, you have a straight bar. How many variations can you come up with a straight bar for a squat? A lot, right? Foot placement, depth, to a box, not to a box, Anderson squats. Like, there's all these hack squats, Zercher squats. Like, you can do all of these variations. So you don't need to get complicated. People just like that, and Conjugate really, there's 2 types of people, according to the Tony Robbins, is where I learned this from. But there's people who like structure and there's people who like chaos, right? And so the cool thing with Conjugate is it's like a concept of like, here's a template, and then you can have chaos within that template. So every day can be different, like every single week. Like, I never do the same accessory for my lats 2 weeks in a row, right? But you don't have to do it that way. Like, you literally could do 3 weeks of the same movement and then rotate it out. You could do 5 rep max, 3 rep max, 1 rep max for the main movement. So it's only as complicated as you want to make it. But I think people see what we put online, or we're putting online, and to them it's just like, well, this doesn't make any sense. He's got reverse band, he's going to a board, like, he's got a slingshot on. Like, how do you even know what you're doing? And to that it's kind of like, yeah, like, you can come up with tons of variations, but keep it simple, and then once that stops working, just move to the next thing. That's really the key, right? And that's like the key with anything. The cool thing is you don't actually have to change the template. You're just changing the movements within the template.
I have like 32 quotes of all the stuff you're saying, but have a template, and you can have chaos within that template. That's brilliant. I mean, that's from a guy that's been training, his entire life, and understands good training and what it does to the body and how to progress. But I did have a question. One of the things you said kind of hit close to home. You talked about your relationship with Louie. Well, I had a guy I used to work with in corporate America, and no one wanted to work with him. He was very eccentric. Like, this guy, I don't know if I've ever told this story, but he was a very smart guy. He was a scientist, and he would walk down the hallway and do mathematical computations in the sky. And then when he was done, he would like wipe it off and then keep walking. Like, he was one of those guys.
That's a dude that lied on his resume.
Super smart guy. I love the guy, but no one could work with him because he was so eccentric. But I was, you know me, right? I'm always that guy that can connect with anyone. And I was the only guy in the whole facility that he could work with. And I imagine that's sort of part of that relationship with you and Louie, you being his voice box. But he was kind of off-putting to a lot of people, and a lot of people couldn't understand him. Can you talk a little bit about, did Louie ever confide in you that like he appreciated what you were doing kind of with the Conjugate?
No way. Louie would
Yeah.
never say that, anything like that. In fact, like, so in his book, The Last Samurai, or I can't remember what it's called, Iron Samurai, I think it's called. He talks about everyone, and he called me a night rider, someone who came and went. That was like his thing. And that was like part of the fuel that, like, with the comeback,
Right.
And then of course someone pointed out to me, one of my training partners from Westside. I still keep in contact with all those guys, and they come to meets and help me still. But we were talking, they're like, you do realize he probably wrote that to piss you off on purpose because he knew you'd get you back lifting. And I was like,
right.
Like, beyond the grave, the dude is still freaking making me do shit that I never thought I was possible. But one of the things, like, with Lou was he would never really say stuff to you, but his actions showed you that, right? So when I decided to step back and retire, and I had that conversation with him, which very few people do. So, like, right there was me showing him respect by going to breakfast, sitting down with him, telling him the truth. And then, I came back, I think it was a year or 2 years later, and we sat down again, and I explained even more about where I was, because I had more understanding of it. Sure. And I know he really appreciated that. But one of the ways he showed me that, like, I think he trusted me with the system was, when I left, he asked me to do the Conjugate seminars for CrossFit. And so, for 2 years, I got to fly around the world teaching Conjugate to these CrossFit gym owners, and we had to think of it differently in terms of, like, how do you get Conjugate done in an hour, And so, when you're working with a general pop class, you don't have to be too concerned about a lot of things in terms of, their maximal weights is not that much, right? So you can give them 20 minutes and say, okay, you got to find a max within 20 minutes, right? And then for assistant exercises, we can do trisets and supersets to speed stuff up, right? So it's all about looking at the timing and say, okay, like, dynamic work, well, if there's 12 sets every minute, that's 12 minutes. So you've got 3 minutes to warm up, 12 minutes to do your set, So, like, if you need more warm up, come in before class, do your foam roll, do whatever, but class starts at this time. And, and so we, it was almost running a boot camp. Like, I'd have 5 people doing tricep extensions on the floor. I'd have another 5 people do band face pulls out on all of the racks. But him allowing me to do that and trusting me to do that, I think that showed me that, like, he appreciated me beyond just being a lifter. He did protect me a lot when I was there as a lifter from these opportunities. At first I thought he was trying to hold me back. And what I realized was he knew what I could accomplish as a lifter, and he knew these things would be distraction. And so he allowed me to do stuff, but he also pulled back. Like, I was heavily involved in recreating the certification, and filming that. And Smitty, you were there when we did all of that. But I was the one who said, okay, like, this is what we got to do. I wrote the sales copy to sell it, and we sold out within like 3 hours, so the sales copy I could take credit for, but the reality is I think I could have just said, we're running a seminar, like, Louie's running a seminar with these people, and we would have sold out, right? That's how demand was at the time. But after that, like, he could see my lifting was really starting to take off, and so he pulled back, having me involved on the business side. And so, of course, when I left, you don't expect someone, when you're leaving them and you're leaving the team, like, as whether it's the right time or not, it's never easy for people. So for him to trust me to go do those seminars around the world, like, that was enough for me to be like, okay, like, I must have had some impact on him where he's willing to let me go do that. And it was one of the coolest things ever, because when I first got into powerlifting, everybody always said, you'll never make money off this. There was no online coaching, there was no apps, there was none of this stuff, And so my programming from everybody around me was like, you'll never make money. And my brain was always like, there's got to be a way, And I was doing the strength and conditioning thing in college, only to find out that all of those guys were in massive debt, and none of them even made $100,000 a year. And I was like, what? you work like
Hmm.
18-hour days for less than. I was like, I don't understand this. And that,
Right.
so it was just awesome. And I think that to me, that was all I needed to just say like, oh, okay, like he trusts me enough to pass this on.
Wow. Well, I just want to point out that it takes a high level of thinking to utter the phrase, he protected.
Wow.
That's so good.
Amazing. Well, I did have a question that I was curious about. You just bent some inconceivable in one lift. You've exceeded my total. You just bented the Arnold.
Yeah.
And I was very curious from a dad perspective because you have 2 young kids now, right? So one of the things that you talked about was having such a problem keeping weight on and sleeping and all these different things. And I was wondering, when you have a comeback like this and you start thinking I'm going to utter one of the phrases that I've said a million times that I always attribute to you, that you told me at a seminar at Elite, and you go, mass moves mass, right? And I that's in a lot of my books, quoting you, because I remember when you told me that, we were by the rack, and it was just like such an impact, because at that point, again, all the information we got was from these seminars, but you articulate it so well from a powerlifting perspective because of your own joint angles, limb length, and all this stuff. And you were talking about how the bigger you are, your leverage changes. And I remember that was such a pivotal point in my coaching. But I remember thinking back to that quote when I saw that you were benching 1,000 at the Arnold, a few weeks ago. And I was like, well, mass moves mass. He must have put a ton of weight back on, because I remember when you were going through your powerlifting, you went into bodybuilding. But I was thinking, being a dad, having kids, a wife that count on you, like, was that like a consideration thinking about coming back and trying to bench?
So basically, so what, 2 years ago was when Louie passed, right around this time after the Arnold, right?
Right.
And I, after the bodybuilding show, I basically like got convinced that I could be a pro bodybuilder. And so it was about 8 months after the show, and I'm eating out of Tupperware, and I can hear myself breathing heavy. Now, when I got into bodybuilding, I never expected it to take more drugs in bodybuilding than I ever took with powerlifting, right? I had no clue that was like even possible. But you become a chemical experiment, and you're doing this drug to counteract that drug, and you're doing this drug to make sure this drug works. Like, so like it was like another layer of the game, right? Because there's all these things that go into it. And that's kind of why I always love geared lifting, because it's not just you and the barbell. There's all these other things, right? There's this level of mastery of the equipment and being able to get the most out of the equipment. So it's like you could master all these different things. But I just remember I was sitting there. I was probably 280 again. I was heavy breathing. And I just said, I can't do this. Like, there's just no way I can do this again. Like, and I put the fork down, and I literally quit cold turkey, quit everything, quit working out, quit eating like a bodybuilder, quit taking all the supplements and everything. So fast forward to post COVID, I'd gone through, a business partner died from cancer, stress of COVID. We had insane amount of growth in the business. And I was back up to 340 pounds. But not in any good way. like 340 wearing like 2XL t-shirts. Like when I was powerlifting, I was 320 wearing 4XL, right? So I saw a picture. I'm going to post it at some point. I've been keeping it for when I have a post that that I'm going to use it for. But like, I look like Jabba the Hutt. Like, I'm just sitting there on the couch. I got my daughter, and I just look terrible. But the turning point, and this is sad, the turning point was Louie's death. But I had begun to try to get back in shape multiple times, never really, pushing it. I would stick to something for 30 days and then not work out for 2 months. But my wife took me to therapy, and I thought I'd been with her before, and it was always about things that she was working on, and they wanted my perspective or bring me into what they were talking about. So that's what I went into the room thinking. And she just looked at me and she said, I think you're going to die. And I was like, what? She was like, you have to sleep with a machine. You have to do this, do that, And so like, I casually try to say, well, like even if I lose 100 pounds, I had sleep apnea when I was like 220. Like, I'm always going to need the machine. So I tried to like downplay it, but that little voice was in my head. You know, we have 2 children. They'll be 6 and 4 next month. But so I started to try to get back. And then when Louie passed, I was supposed to go back to see him, but I was so embarrassed by the way I looked and how out of shape I was. I knew I wasn't going to go work out there. And like, one of the rules Louie has is if you come to Westside, you work out. Like, you don't get to fucking watch, motherfucker. Like, you get under the barbell, you fucking work out. So I had keep putting off visiting. And so by doing that, I didn't get to talk to him that last time. But I went back for a memorial that Laura Phelps was doing during her women's pro-am. And I had been out of touch of the sport for a long time. Leah Reitman was there. She was going for 1,000 pounds. Amber Alice was there. She squatted 8 something. There was a few other girls that went over 800 that day in the squat, and there was like 600 deadlifts, right? And I'm going, what the hell happened? Like, I'm looking up the men's numbers, and you know, they've gone up a little bit, but Jimmy Cole benched 14, like 13 something, 1320 was the record. I was like, what the hell's going on? And it lit a fire like that. Like that whole thing made me realize that I'd been avoiding the one thing that could probably save me, and that was powerlifting, because of who I was and the extremity I went to back. So I made the decision to come back, but I also set some very stringent rules. Number one was nothing above, TRT dosage, right? If we're going to do this, we're going to do it based on what the doctor wants to give me. No, nothing else. No trend, no fucking like orals. Like, we're doing this just like, what do you need? Like, what is that? What is that going to give you a regular baseline, right? Because you want to live. So I don't care about anything. Water can kill you if you drink too much, right? So powerlifting, we experimented, we pushed the boundaries, and I found what my body could tolerate. But it's kind of like being an alcoholic and figuring out what you can function on, right? So I said none of that. And then in terms of the body weight, the goal was to essentially come down, weight classes, just continue to come down. Well, of course, I got under 300, but being my identity was with 308 all-time world record holder, I was really I would get under 300, but then I would struggle to lose any more, right? I just realized that, like, oh, it's because my identity is a 308 powerlifter. And so I wanted to get the 1,000-pound bench. It was just the goal I set, looking at where the numbers were, what I thought I could do. My bench press is the only lift that is, back to where it was. Everything else is just, I'm dealing with, I'm beat down. I'm, injuries and things that I created that I didn't realize were issues that now in my, 39 yesterday. So encroaching 40, but I did one of those tests where they test you test your age, like internal age, and I was like 54, right? So, from all the damage I've done. So my whole goal now is to reverse that, so I can eventually be the age I am. But yeah, so I was around 308, but I was staying at the 300 mark, and going into the Arnold, like I got injured my last competition, hurt my shoulder quite a bit. I attempted 1,000 twice, and on the second one, something popped in the shoulder. No tear, nothing like that, but just it took probably a month before I could bench pain free again. So getting ready for the Arnold, I only had I think I had like 4 training sessions in my bench press shirt before the Arnold. So each one had to be good for me, to know that I was going to do it. Honestly, my numbers were 50 pounds behind what they were going into the last competition. So I wasn't really confident going into the Arnold. And then I talked to Rob Farrell with Fate, who makes the bench press shirt that I use. Talked to my wife. I talked to one of my best friends, and they all kind of were like, well, Rob pointed out that my weight was down. So post previous contest, so he suggested pushing it back up. And then the people I talked to pointed out the fact that, like, I might never get to do another Arnold, right? Like, this could be the last competition, like, with my age and just with the way my life is. Like, I don't know, like, I might not get to be able to do it again. And so they were like, you really should just go and like, the question was, could you get a PR? And I was like, yeah, I know I can bench like a small PR, which I would have had to do like 935 for a PR. But I was like, I don't feel like I'm close to the 1,000. And they were like, okay, well, go get the PR. And then, if you feel good, take a shot at 1,000. So Fast forward to the Arnold. I weighed in at 312. I was 318 the morning of. I did an IV bag, which is crazy. The fact you can just like, there's a booth with IV bags now, like in the Arnold. We used to have to hide in hotel rooms with, nurses that were like hooking us up. And now it's just, totally normal. Just sit there, on the floor. But so I did that. So my weight was 318. Take my opener. It goes up so fast that my entire body came off the bench press. Like I was so exposed to my upper back, 880 pounds. My upper back came off. So I actually got red lighted because it looked like the barbell went up and down. And so I had to make that choice. Do I go for a PR? And then I realized, like, I'm at a world. This is the world finals for the XPC. Like, I probably should try to win before I worry about a PR, right? And so I decided to take 880 again, and I hit it. Well, the other people competing were missing their attempts. And so I was like, I don't think anyone's going to take more than me that if I hit this 880. I think I would win with it. So I got it out of the way. But of course, it was confidence booster too, right? Because I knew I could do it. I just benched it. So it's not like I had any doubt, so I was going to get it. I just had to slow it down a little bit. So I didn't, nothing like that. And then I was like, okay, do I go for a PR? And I was like, you know what? I've already fucking won. I want to bench 1,000. That's all I'm doing this for. I don't care about the 935. I don't care about 950. I don't care about 96. Like, I want to bench 1,000. So I said, just throw it on it. Let's go. And, on my Instagram, there's a video, but you can literally see the rage, and you can see me go into a place of darkness that I have not gone to since 2012. In fact, I wasn't even sure if that was still inside of me, and, it was scary because it took a while for me to come out of that. Right. And there's a lot of, there's so much good that happened back then, but there's also a lot of negative that happened. And I wasn't proud of the man I was back then. So it was like one of these moments that it was like, okay, am I going to come back from this? Like, I'm going to be able to come back to normal and let this go. And I was able, through some breathing exercises and stuff, I was able to do that. But what it showed me more than anything, number one, it's self-belief. I knew I could come back and do something. But I wanted to prove it to myself too. Right. But more than anything, it showed me that what I did in 2012 wasn't a fluke. Right. This is who I am. And for the last decade, I haven't been really living as that person with that level of confidence. Right. I've done a lot of great things, but I've also allowed a lot of average in my life. Not to my happiness, but just because, and it just reminded me no, we get to create the narrative for our own life. We get to live into whatever we choose, and only ourselves can stop us from achieving that. Right. And so with all of the, the battle going into it, and I mean, legitimately 2 weeks out, I said, I'm not doing this meet. I didn't even book my plane ticket to the week of the Arnold because I was in my head, I could cancel at any time. It's no big deal. All I lose is my entity. To coming out on the other side, and just literally I was in tears after of joy, which I've never experienced that before from lifting. And, someone said, what's next? And I was like, I don't know, but I did it. That's enough. I don't really know. I'm not going to say I'm never going to bench in a bench shirt again. But I'm going to drop to 275 because I can't set another goal for a number because I'll keep my weight up. Right. And my wife's my worst enemy. She's like, you could bench 1,100. And I was like, hey, knock that off.
Well, I just think it's incredible. You went from 880 and then you put Smitty's max on top of that.
That's right.
And jumped to 1,000. And but can you take us through what is going through your head? I saw the video of just the dark rage flowing through, and so I can at least relate to the fuel, the jet fuel that you're thinking of. But what's your mindset once you step onto the platform? You're getting set up on the bench press. Are you thinking of cues? Are you thinking of just getting angry? What's the thought process there?
So for me, rage has always been the secret weapon in my back pocket, right? And I've had a lot of adversity I've had to overcome. I've been working with Jay and Blakely recently. He was one of the guys who pushed the bench press records up. I think he might have been the first to bench 700, but he did a lot. He'd go up and down in weights and stuff like that. But he reminded me that it's not the events that define you, it's the ability to overcome those events. So like your strength from something is built from overcoming the trauma. The trauma is not the thing, it's how you respond to the trauma. That's what makes you stronger. That's what gives you this strength. And so the rage that I go, like the place I go to is just basically like, you know, you've overcome all of these things. Like this, like it's basically like this barbell's got nothing. Like you own this barbell, right? That's what I'm gonna, and I'm almost treat the barbell like an opponent. And in fact, I walked up to it and I shook it before I went, and I could feel it moving. And I've like the one thing I'll say, like it's not the first time I've had 1,000 pounds in my hands, right? I've benched it to boards. I've attempted it in competition, I think 6 times. So like we've danced before, you know what I mean? Like, and I've lost, right? So like, this is like the bully who's kicking your ass, and you're like, and you go away and you come back and you're like, okay, now I'm ready to kick your ass. And you get your ass kicked again, go away again, come back. Like this was my day. And when I shook that barbell, I knew, I was like, you fucking, it feels light as fuck. Like you going down, you know? And so I let down, and then I knew I needed to bring myself a little bit of center to think through the cues, like get your feet set, get your belly up, get your back tight, grip that barbell, twist everything. And then as soon as they unrack it, I take that deep breath, and really in my head, I just like, let's go. Right. So I came down with it, and then I got the press command. And as it starts to come up, I'm like, oh, you got nothing. You got nothing. And it just fucking flew up. Like I knew that it was going to go up. And I would say I was almost shocked, right? Like it's like when you do something, and I remember my 1205 squat was the same way. You know, like I heard, I was going down, I was like starting to black out because I was in the hole for so long, and then I hear up, and then Louie's little voice in the background, and like I came up with it, and I'm like, whoa, did they fucking take that? That felt pretty easy. And then 3 white lights. But that's the thing, when everything comes together, it seems easy, and that's the fucking trick, because then you start to think to yourself, well, what's next? And you don't enjoy the moment. And so I didn't allow myself to go to that place. I didn't allow myself to start thinking like, oh, I could go for 11, or, you know, like maybe that's in the future. I just said, I'm going to enjoy this. And I did. I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it for I'm still enjoying it, but
yeah, of course,
you know, I fully appreciate it for a week. I've gone ahead, and I've never done this. I've got the belt that I won. F8 sent me this 1,000-pound bench coin, and a t-shirt that has 1,000-pound bench. I framed the t-shirt. I put the coin. It's on my wall as a reminder, because I've never allowed myself to truly celebrate. And I think it's on one side, it's what drives you forward, right? Because you're never satisfied. But on the other side, it's what hurts you, because you never think you're good enough. And so for once, I was like, I'm not going to have any of this. I'm just going to enjoy the fact that I just did something I fucking wanted to do. It doesn't matter if it means anything to anybody else. It means everything to me, and I'm going to let it mean everything to me. And so JM pointed out, maybe that's the lesson I came back to learn, because I didn't get that the first time around.
Yeah, that's incredible. That was the first thing I thought about when I saw your comeback, is like, how, like Smitty and I have said on this podcast before, like there's no happy bodybuilders on stage. You know, like they're just driven by rage. And that's, you know, and I don't know if you guys saw a recent Mike Tyson interview, and he was talking about what does it take to get back in shape. And he's like, I don't like it, because, you know, the me that gets back in shape is ego driven. And he's like, and the interviewer's like, oh, you don't like the world's best fighter? And he's like, it's everything that comes with it. And I was like, wow, that's because I think it's a natural progression or evolution in a professional, you know, that has some success, you know, like you start to pay your bills on time, you have a family, and like there's less to be angry about.
Right.
And like there's all those memes of like, you know, me, you know, with leaving my healthy, beautiful family to drive to the gym and listen to like gangster rap. Right. So I always think like, what is it that's driving these people that can operate at a high level for a long period of time? And it's just cool to hear you talk about that, and that you could dig deep and utilize all of the mental turmoil in a recognition that you've overcome it, but still use it. That's awesome.
Well, I do have a question. If Louie was there watching the 1,000-pound bench, what do you think he'd tell you after you got up?
Well, AJ, if you go to 350, you probably can take that record from Jimmy. So,
So Louis was never satisfied.
Louis always saw your potential beyond what you could see, and he was never wrong. But at the same time, like, if I had done what he wanted in 2012, I probably would have ended up dead because I you get these little messages from the universe, and you get these. For me, I have a narrative in my head. I have a voice. I know not everybody has that voice, right? I could call it insanity, or I could call it God, whatever you want to think. But I had this voice, and there was signs that like I was going in the wrong direction, And I mean, full transparency, the last year of training, like going into contests, like I couldn't even like look down too long, my nose would bleed.
Wow.
It just like my blood pressure was so high. I was a really nice shade of purple. I had severe sleep apnea, which I didn't really know about, but like the rumble strip on the freeway saved my life so many times. I mean, my house, it was a long road to my house, and there was a stop sign about halfway. And I'd often stop to the stop sign and fell asleep, like
Wow.
just in that short amount of time. So, it was one of those things where I knew I was very unhealthy, and unfortunately, I had friends in the industry who, were talking about all these things that I was paying attention to. It wasn't like I was naive, and so I thought like, I could lose weight, and Louis would have supported me doing whatever I wanted, I believe. But I couldn't be in that environment because I knew in that environment I would want to be the best there was. And to be the best there is, you have to do things and make sacrifices, that do potentially, run the risk of losing your life. I don't think I would have ended up having kids if I stayed there because I was completely sterile at the time. And so like in order to step back, it took probably 4 or 5 years for me to get back to like a natural, testosterone level. And that was using supplements to be able to do that. Right. It's not like it just bounces back, and so it took a while and whatnot, but it's just one of those things where like when you look at it, at the end of the day, like Lou was able to get more out of us than we thought possible. He created one of the environments to do that. The questions I had coming back were like, can I do this? Can I do this with these rules that I'm setting on place? Can I do this? Like I don't really have a training crew. I have a couple of guys that train with me. They're awesome folks, and I appreciate, them working with me, but I train at 10 a.m. And the reason I train at 10 a.m. is because I'm not giving up my evenings with the kids, so we take them to school and then we go to the gym. That's the schedule. So trying to build a crew at like, 9:30, 10 a.m. hasn't really worked out. But luckily there's people in the gym that will help spot and load. And so we've made it work, And so those are a lot more questions for me, is like, how is this all going to work? And I just figured, when there's a will, there's a way, right? You figure it out. And at the end of the day, it's the effort you put in. And so, regardless of who I had there, if I had to go heavy, all right, well, we'll get 3 or 4 guys from walking around to help, and we'll take that risk. But for me, like, I proved something to myself. I think I also have proven that, the training system works. It works regardless of age. It works regardless. Now, there is changes and things that I have to do differently because like my joints don't recover the way they used to, right? So not every max effort I can max out, right? Depending on what the last one was. So sometimes training is to prepare for the next workout, right? So self-regulation has become a bigger thing. I can't just, I can't do the 4 core days every single week the way I used to do them, right? So moving that, figuring that out, figuring how often I can go like ballistic versus when I need to like just get the work in. Those are all new things for me, but it's part of what makes it exciting now. And the biggest difference I would say now versus back then is I actually enjoy training. I'm not in it to compete anymore. I compete because that's what makes me show up 4 times a week. It's like, everybody says if you want to lose weight, like do a bodybuilding show or, book a photo shoot or something like that. You have to have an end date. Otherwise you just keep moving it. So the competitions keep me showing up at least 4 times a week, right? Because I know I need to go train. I know the competition's getting close. But if I don't do a competition, it doesn't matter to me.
Wow.
Like when I do the competitions, I'm not like, oh yes, I'm here and this is the greatest thing ever. It's flipped now. Now it's all about the training. I'm enjoying the journey. And then the competition is just a display of the result versus I literally live for competition. I couldn't care about training when I was at Westside.
Right.
I only showed up because I knew that I wouldn't get to I wouldn't do well in the competition if I didn't train. Right. So I think the mentality I have now, I'm not sure if I would have got to the top back then, but I know I would have probably longevity. I probably wouldn't have walked away for 10 years. Right now, I have a much more I was emceeing a contest a few weeks ago, and there was like a 68-year-old and a 72-year-old lifting. And I was like, I hope I can still walk at 70, because my knees are cracking, my ankles are cracking. I'm like, oh my gosh, my hip hurts. Like when I do some squats, I'm like, geez, these guys are competing. I'm like, I got to start thinking like that. Like, how do I compete at 72? Right.
So if you, knowing what you know now on everything you just kind of talked about, if you were to go back to that 2012 AJ and the one that you're worried wasn't going to make it very much longer, what advice would you give that AJ?
So I would have started working with like a laboratory, something like now you can work with like Merrick Health, right? You can work with them, but I definitely should have had a doctor, like making sure I knew, if my liver was toxic, if everything, like what was working, because really it's not about, everything's about optimization, right? And more is not always better. I don't care what anyone thinks. Like working hard to work hard, like, we all know people that work like labor jobs and they're like every day slaving away and they don't make a lot of money doing that, right? Like hard work doesn't equal results, just like more drugs doesn't equal bigger lifts, right? So that's so that would have been the foundation, like my health, right? And figuring out the diet, because for me, like I got to a point where I was eating 3 clean meals a day, but I was also eating 3 fast food meals a day. Right. Because I couldn't, like Smitty said earlier, I couldn't keep my body weight up, but like there is a way to do it. Right. So like, being smarter there so that I would have been healthier, because I think the health risks led me to like even worse sleep. Right. And with the sleep apnea, like, and then being on tren, like I had like night terrors. And I would wake up and then the lack of sleep and then all the health issues, it just doesn't really create a good mental, mindset. And so it was like, you can only push down so much for so long. And then it's like, it's like an injury, right? You feel something hurting. And if you ignore it, I can bench. It's fine. It just hurts a little bit. Well, eventually you're going to tear a pec or, have a tear a rotator cuff or something like that. It's like the little warning signs there. And if you ignore them, they just build and build and build until they're shouting at you. And that's what I did. I just ignored it all to the point where it was like shouting at me. And I mean, my flip was so extreme. I did a juice diet for the first 45 days after I quit, because I was like, I need to drastically lose weight. And of course, I ended up being like 280 and looking like complete shit because like I was just drinking these fucking juices. But that's like the extremity of my mind was like, I have to go completely, I swung the pendulum way too far.
Started doing yoga.
Yeah, I know I was.
Really?
Well, I did ROM, but it was, an hour a day and walking and swimming. And I didn't even want to lift weights because, and then it was like, okay, well, let's try CrossFit. And that quickly turned into, well, let's become the fittest man in the world, because who I was, I got access to all the top athletes. We were hanging out all the time, with these events. And, CrossFit was inviting me to, go do stuff with them. And so I started working out with they work out 3 times a day. I should be working out 3 times a day. And then, I had a powerlifting team I was coaching. One day I walk in, I'd already done 2 workouts with CrossFit. And I'm like, they're benching. And I'm like, I'm going to jump in and show these young guns, what I got. They want to do a rep off contest at 225, and of course, boom, tear my pec, right? And but instead of being like, oh, that's your sign, I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll bodybuild while I'm injured, because I can work everything but my chest, so I just do the bodybuilding.
Yeah.
and then, to extreme on the bodybuilding. And so after that, it was kind of like, well, I kind of had the realization that like everything I did was extreme, and it was always ending in end of relationships. So it was like, okay. And I just got into a new relationship. I was like, I don't want to screw this up. So I was like, I can see this heading the wrong way. So that was a little bit of it. And then of course my health too, because I was like, oh, this is just the same thing. Even though I got abs, like I'm not healthy,
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are kind of some of the things that led to that. But yeah. And so this time around, it's like, a lot of the doubt I've had is like, because I won't do what I used to do, right? It's like, can you still be good? And that's the thing, like 1,000 is a lot, but the world record bench press is 1,400 pounds. So, now there is only one guy doing that. Nobody else has benched 1,300. And I think there's only 2 people who have benched 1,200. So it's not like, I mean, he's way out ahead of everybody. But, like my point is that like in my head, it's like, I know this sounds ridiculous, but it's only 1,000 pounds. Right, the world record's 1,400. So,
well, I think you have to think that if you're going to bench 1,000,
right?
Yeah,
right?
And I know when I say it, it's ridiculous, but that was the mindset that allowed me to do it. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, your greatest superpower is your greatest downfall.
Yeah. So I did want to transition into education, because you are a coach with so much experience, not only training yourself over these many years, but also being in the know at Westside for so many years, and doing the CrossFit seminars for Conjugate and all these different things. Are you transitioning to online education now? Is that kind of where you're taking it?
Yeah. So that's something also like, I know you guys are probably familiar with the hero's journey. The listeners might not be, but like, the hero's journey simplified is basically there's a calling, you meet a mentor, you basically have all these trials and tribulations, battles, whatever. Then you figure it out and you come out on the other side, you're tested, you prove that you figured it out. And then you're supposed to return to, the regular world, the ordinary world, and share what it is you've learned. I was doing that with the seminars, and then I kind of got into, business on a different level and kind of just stopped that. And I always felt something was missing, that level of fulfillment, right? I'm making money, I'm building awesome stuff, but it wasn't nourishing my soul. And so with the comeback, I started to think like, oh, like maybe like strength and conditioning and this field, like maybe I can be in this as a business. Like my wife, she's a high level sports nutritionist, so she's working with fighters and strongman athletes, powerlifters. Like she's got all these amazing athletes. She's making a living doing it. All my friends that I was at Westside with, they either have gyms, they have online coaching programs, and they've built amazing things. And I was like, you know what? Like, I think this is an avenue I'm going to start exploring. So, I got in judging at powerlifting meets, and I'm the APO state chairman, so I'm going to be running meets over here. And then like my goal is to really just start creating content, educational content, like Louie did, just sharing what I know. And I've been fortunate to learn not just from Louie, but other guys who are at Westside that have gone on and like, I work with John Meadows. He's passed now, but I work with him because he was a West Side guy, who became a bodybuilder. So I wanted to do a bodybuilding system that had, conjugate base to it. And so I learned like, oh, okay. I learned stuff that I was like, man, like some of this stuff I would have been dope to do at West Side. Would it made me any stronger? I don't know. But like some of his methods really like push you, right? And it was kind of when I started programming for people online, one of the things I realized was their environment is pretty shit most of the time. So you have to create intensity with the movement. You can't create intensity in the environment. So like, I don't need them to get all worked up to try to beat someone else. No. We're just going to do strip sets, and you're just going to destroy you're going to break the muscle down because you don't have a choice. Like you're going to failure, then we're taking a plate off. You're going to failure, take a plate. So there will be nothing left at the end. And so things like that, and so I just want to start sharing it. There's a few people out there that do a phenomenal job with sharing it, and they have kind of their own twists and stuff. But like I've come to realize, and I think what held me back for a long time, number one was Louie, right? Louie being alive, like he's the master, go learn from him. And then when you have all these other people teaching too, it's kind of like, well, I'm just another voice amongst the noise. But what I've realized is that like each of us has our own unique story that people resonate with. And so even if we shared the exact same thing, like we have a greater reach because one person might not resonate with another person, right? Their story or the way they present the information or just their demeanor. Like some people don't vibe with it. And so I'm like, you know what? Like this gave me everything in my life that I've had. Like nearly all my friends come through powerlifting, like some of the greatest times of my life. Like from a business standpoint, even though I left fitness, like fitness is how I met the people that I ended up going into business with, right? So
Right.
I'm like, I owe everything to this industry. And I'm like, you know what? If I could do anything for the rest of my life, I'd want to be with these people. And I just said the other day, like someone asked me about the experience of the Arnold, and I said, I just realized like these are my type of people. This is who I like hanging out with. Like
Right.
these guys, like people who are into this stuff. And yeah, I could blend it into everything else, and you know, I will, like, but it's kind of interesting because I'm like, you know what, like I realize that for me, it's more about what makes me happy, and
Right.
I
Well, I
love
also
talking
think
about this.
I think, yeah, I mean, the way that we rectify the situation that we started this podcast on with the, I don't want to call it misinformation, but the lack of substance and, nutritive information on social media is more people like you to balance out the amount of information that's going out there,
Right.
So I think like you probably are maybe harsh on yourself. I think everyone is, especially like the higher level you get, I think like it takes that level of scrutiny, that self scrutiny to get you to that point.
Mm.
And then you obviously, there's imposter syndrome. There's all this like, holding yourself accountable that you're obviously using that lens now and what your next steps are going to be. But I guess I'm just saying that, that's the whole essence of becoming Ronin, the
Right.
hero's journey, and exactly what you said. I think you owe it to yourself and you owe it to the people that need that information to go out there and do that.
Yeah, and if I'm honest, a little bit of why I've been slow, I've done a few things, but I got a whole list of stuff planned, right? But I think a little bit of the reason I've been slow is like I wanted to prove to myself that I was that same guy, like that I didn't want to be the guy who used to do it.
Yeah.
Like, where did AJ come from? He's been gone for 10 years. Oh, he's just coming back to try to make money. Like, that was the narrative I was telling myself. I don't believe it's true based on what other people have said.
Right.
But, like, for my own sanity, I had to do something that I was proud of again. So I could be like, you know what I do? There's no doubt. You can't fucking question me. Like, you cannot question me. Like, I know how it works. Like, I know. And I think the next phase of that is you and this is something that Louie always said, is like, you never judge a coach by what he says, always judge him by the results he's got.
Exactly.
And so it's like my next phase is building those other lifters and strongmen and strong women and other athletes. I mean, I've seen guys like Travis Mash, what he's done with Olympic lifting, it's phenomenal. He's proven in Olympic lifting that Americans can be great, right? And he's done it with a conjugate basis. And I say base because it's very different, but it's that kind of example, and guys like Greg Panora, who was one of my training partners, has built a phenomenal team online, and he's created a West Side experience with community, by having, online challenges and stuff like that on a daily basis. So I've seen people be able to do this, and it's like, I feel like I do have unique perspective, unique views, and enough to really bring more value. And at the end of the day, I realized one thing with Louie. A lot of people got upset or would argue against him, but the reality is all he wanted to do was make people stronger. And that's the same for me. I just want to help people become the strongest version of themselves under the barbell, but in life too. And so, that's where I think my unique perspective comes, because I was out of all of this for a decade, building a software company, doing things and coming back in, you go, it's not that different, right? Like the guy who's successful under the bar can be successful with anything they do. And Smitty, you went the other way. You kind of came from the business into fitness, and you had this different, and you were like, wait a minute, you guys, if you just add structure to this, what you're doing in business, like you guys can grow. And so I think more of that will happen, and it will just make the industry better, and it will help grow the sports and, the sports that we love and that have given us everything we have.
Well, there's plenty of guys out there benching 405 that have done a lot wrong, but I don't think you can do much wrong and bench 1,000. So that is definitely a feather in your cap. But
yeah, I was just going to say, where should we send people if they want to learn more about like your coaching services, conjugate model, like where all your resources going to be?
Yeah, just Instagram's going to be the best place, AJ Roberts Power, and then I'll have all the links in the bio as I add stuff, and just DM me if you have any questions or want to inquire about anything.
Awesome. Well, we're humbled. We're honored.
Absolutely. I
Well,
mean,
thank you so
I've
much
known
for your time.
AJ so many years. I remember going to the Arnold Classic, stopping by Westside, stopping by Elite. AJ was there. Him and Louie were, running groups.
I actually remember getting into the game. Smitty, obviously, I was very lucky to be able to ride his coattails to all the seminars. And we were at an early seminar. I can't remember if it was at Elite or somewhere. I think it was in Jersey. And there was a part where we somehow got partnered up and we were doing some mobility, like hip flexor stretch. Do you remember this?
No.
And I remember trying to lift your knee off the ground. And I think I am still recovering from some L5S1 issues from that. Like just not even
the leg.
Yeah, mass, but like maybe some hip flexor tightness. And I'm like raising my hand. I'm like, yeah, I think it's tight. But yeah, man, it's awesome to see. Everyone loves to see people succeed in their sport, and I think it like exemplifies the human spirit. But it's even cooler to see the comeback, man. It's been awesome to see that.
And that's a part of the thing I haven't even thought about right there, is just like, if I can inspire other people just to get back, like, because for me, I lost something, right? When I gave up powerlifting, I gave it up. Like, I tore my life apart because I was unhappy, and what was left was powerlifting. And so I was like, okay, like, this is what's keeping me unhealthy. Like, this is what's really doing the damage. This is the last thing I have to give up. By doing that, there was powerlifting allowed me to control the rage. And so then I had to face it, right? So now I have to figure out how do I like be a normal person without this, like, avenue for the anger. And it took a long time to like figure that out, and for a lot of it was suppression. I just forced it down. And instead of going where I should have gone, which is, to me, the gym is my sanctuary. The gym is my dojo. It's my church. It's where I figured everything out in life. I avoided it, and I avoided it out of fear that I would awaken that dragon and it would consume me again. And I would be the ego would come back, and I would, I don't give a fuck about my family. I just chasing these numbers. And that was the fear the whole time. And so to be able to come back and control that, and don't get me wrong, over the last 2 years, there's been moments where I've had to catch myself, right? Thought processes or like starting to think a certain way and realizing, this is leading the wrong direction. So I've had to check myself and, work with different people to figure stuff out. But the gym gave me back that like fire, right? It gave me back that, and it has helped me work through a lot of mental issues and realize that like you can, quote unquote, like, tame the dragon, and you can be in control of it. And I think that a lot of people have demons and things in their life. And, for me, isolation and suppression and turning towards substances to avoid that, facing that, just, it led me to an even worse place. Right. And so, the wake up call, with everything that happened with Lou, it was enough to like put me in a place to see like, maybe this is the path out. And, it has been for me. And so I'm looking, I'm thinking about athletes who have to, force retirement or injuries or stuff like that. We're in sports that you can compete forever. There's no age cap for powerlifting, and there's no age cap for bodybuilding. Or being involved in some way as a coach, right? Like, and I think that that's something that it's different a little bit now, but the Western culture in general, like if you're a player, the next step isn't a coach, right? It's not like a natural path over here, whereas like you go to these Middle East, like Russia or Ukraine or places like that, and it's like if you're a top athlete, like you're immediately recruited into being a coach, like when your career is coming towards an end and you're part of, you put on a squat coaching team, and and then eventually you'd have your own thing. And that's like over here, it's like players retire and disappear, and in pro sports or whatever. So, maybe there's something there with that like, hopefully I can like show people that like it's never really too late, and nowadays with co-ed sports and all the different activities that are out there, like, what pickleball is huge right now, and I know people in their 50s and 60s playing that. So it's never really too late to be active. That's what I'm trying to say. It's never like, and I like, for me, like, all of my mental health is better when I'm working out, moving, and I feel better. I'm more confident. Like it's like, that's the missing piece. And hopefully for people who have been active that are kind of falling off the bandwagon, like I can show them that, like, hey, you not only can get back to where you were, you can be even better version of that, And so I think that that's part of the message that I'll be sharing.
I love that. Reminds me of the quote that you always say: the man crosses the river in the morning, crosses the river at night, and it's not the same man, it's not the same river. Yeah. Boom.
Love it.
Well, I think that's a very on brand segment to end it on.
Yes. And I still have 50 questions for you. So we will definitely be having you back on when you have some free time. But AJ, it was awesome catching up. I caught that 1,000-pound bench and I was like, dude, I got to reach out to him. I haven't talked to him in a few years, and I'm so proud of you. You're a family man. You're still training. You're educating, and I think, you're evolving. You know what I mean? The podcast that we do here is man's journey through life, right? And you're a different man than I met 20 years ago, and I must say a better man. So we appreciate
chiseling away at that character.
Yes. Chisel away all that is not me.
Wow. Excellent. Thanks again, man.
Thank you.